Desperate, a bankrupt millionaire walked out of his own company aimlessly. After being betrayed and expelled in a state of shock, he stumbled over his own step and bumped harshly into a street boy who did not look away. "Uncle, I know how to save your company." He froze, shocked by what he had just heard. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more exciting stories like this, and leave a like on the video to keep watching. The polished oak boardroom table reflected Henry Whitfield's distorted image as he stared down at the document before him. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Cambridge's historic spires stretched toward the gray autumn sky, oblivious to the storm raging inside Whitfield Innovations headquarters. "This can't be right," Henry whispered, his voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. 20 years of building his technology empire from a small university startup to a global corporation, and it had come to this: a vote of no confidence. Marcus Pennington, his assistant of 12 years, stood at the opposite end of the table, arms folded across his expensive tailored suit. The man Henry had mentored, trusted with his deepest business secrets, and even invited to family Christmas dinners, now wore the cold expression of a stranger. "The board's decision is unanimous, Henry," Marcus stated, his Cambridge accent more pronounced under stress. "Financial irregularities have been identified. The company is facing potential insolvency. We've had to take emergency measures." Henry scanned the faces around him, board members he'd personally selected over the years. All of them avoided his gaze, except Rebecca Thornton, the sharp-minded financial director whose ambition had always impressed him. Now her green eyes held something else: triumph. "You've been working too hard, Henry," Rebecca said with a practiced, concerned tone. "The stress has affected your judgment. The Pembroke project's failures alone cost us millions." "The Pembroke project was sabotaged," Henry said, rising slowly from his chair. "And now, I see by whom." Security guards appeared at the doorway. Another betrayal. These were men who had nodded respectfully to him every morning for years. "Your personal belongings have been packed," Marcus continued smoothly. "For legal reasons, you'll be escorted from the premises immediately." The rain had started by the time Henry found himself standing on King's Parade, a cardboard box in his arms containing 20 years of his life. His phone buzzed with notification after notification. Access revoked, accounts frozen, company credit cards canceled. The beautiful architecture of Cambridge, which had once inspired his greatest innovations, now loomed mockingly above him. Henry wandered aimlessly through the cobblestone streets, past St. John's College, where he'd once been a promising young student with dreams of changing the world. The rain soaked through his expensive suit, but he barely noticed. 3 hours ago, he'd been one of Britain's most respected entrepreneurs. Now, he was nothing. As darkness fell, Henry found himself at the River Cam, watching punts glide by with tourists huddled under umbrellas. He sat heavily on a bench, the box still clutched to his chest like a life preserver. "You look proper miserable, mate," came a young voice. Henry turned to see a boy of about 14, sheltering under the wooden awning of a nearby boathouse. The boy's clothes were worn, but clean, his intelligent eyes assessing Henry with surprising perception. "Charlie Bennett," the boy said, approaching cautiously. "And you're Henry Whitfield. Saw your picture in the papers lots of times." "Ex-Henry Whitfield, it seems," Henry replied bitterly. Charlie tilted his head. "That Pennington bloke who works for you, he's up to something dodgy." Henry's attention sharpened. "What do you mean?" "I sleep near your building sometimes. Council's supposed to have found me proper accommodation, but—" Charlie shrugged. "3 nights ago I saw him meeting with people. Rich-looking types. Heard your name. Something about Shalom Capital and moving assets." For the first time since the boardroom, Henry felt a flicker of hope. "How would you like a job, Charlie?" "You want chips with that?" Charlie asked, watching Henry pick at his fish with disinterest. They sat in a small cafe in Mill Road, away from Cambridge's touristy center where Henry might be recognized. "I need to think," Henry muttered, pushing his plate away. He'd spent the night in a modest hotel, his personal bank accounts still accessible, though he knew that might not last long. "If what you overheard is true, they've been planning this for months. You need help," Charlie stated matter-of-factly, reaching for Henry's untouched chips. "Not just me. I'm good at getting into places unnoticed, but this sounds like you need someone who knows numbers and such." Henry's phone rang. An unfamiliar number. He answered cautiously. "Mr. Whitfield, it's Laura Harrington." The name took a moment to register. "My former development director?" "The one you fired last year, yes," came the crisp reply. "I think we need to talk." An hour later, they sat in Laura's modest flat in Chesterton. Her living room had been transformed into a home office, with charts and computer screens displaying familiar data. Whitfield Innovations stock prices, project timelines, financial reports. "You've been investigating the company?" Henry asked, both impressed and unnerved. Laura tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, her expression unapologetic. "After you dismissed me for questioning the Cambridge Science Park development, which, by the way, was exactly the financial disaster I predicted, I needed to understand what was happening. Something didn't add up." "You were right," Henry admitted, the words difficult after years of pride. "I should have listened." Laura's expression softened slightly. "Marcus approached me 6 months ago, offering my job back if I supported the board's new direction. When I asked questions about their funding structure and the offshore accounts, the offer disappeared." "Offshore accounts?" Henry leaned forward. "Shalom Capital," Charlie interjected, earning surprised looks from both adults. "That's what they called it. Based in the Cayman Islands, I reckon." Laura nodded slowly. "The boy's right. They've been siphoning research funds, patents, intellectual property, all redirected through Shalom Capital. But they needed your signature on certain documents to complete the takeover legally. Hence the emergency board meeting and the allegations of mismanagement." "But why?" Henry asked. "Marcus was set to inherit leadership eventually." "Because of the Atherton algorithm," Laura said quietly. Henry felt the blood drain from his face. The Atherton algorithm was his most closely guarded project, a breakthrough in quantum computing that could revolutionize data encryption. Only 3 people knew its full potential. "They couldn't access it without me," Henry realized. "And they can't replicate it," Laura added. "But with control of the company and access to your research archives, they could sell it to the highest bidder," Henry finished. "And Edward Blackwood would pay anything for it." Charlie looked between them. "Who's Blackwood?" "Cambridge's most ruthless property developer and technology investor," Laura explained. "He's been trying to acquire Whitfield Technology for years." "We need proof," Henry said, standing abruptly. "Without it, I'm just a disgraced CEO, making accusations." "I might be able to help with that," came a new voice from the doorway. They turned to find a young woman in a mail carrier's uniform. "Rebecca Thornton's assistant," she explained, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. "She fired me last week when I questioned some unusual payments. I made copies of everything." For the first time in days, Henry smiled. "I think we may have a chance." The Cambridge University Library provided the perfect cover for their impromptu war room. Surrounded by ancient texts and hushed whispers, Henry, Laura, and Charlie huddled around a table in the far corner, poring over the documents from Rebecca's assistant. "It's all here," Laura whispered, eyes wide as she scrolled through financial records. Falsified reports, manipulated project data, board meeting minutes that never happened. They've been manufacturing the appearance of company decline for months. "Look at this," Henry pointed to a document on his screen. "Edward Blackwood made 3 large payments to Shalom Capital. The dates align perfectly with our major project failures." Charlie, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly straightened. "They're meeting tonight. Blackwood, Pennington and Thornton. I overheard them in the cafe across from your building yesterday while I was getting us coffees." Henry and Laura exchanged glances. "Where?" Henry asked. "The old boathouse at St. John's, the private one that's supposed to be closed for renovation. 10 o'clock. Henry checked his watch. "That gives us 6 hours to prepare." Laura's expression was skeptical. "Prepare for what, exactly?" "We can't just confront them." "No," Henry agreed. "But we can record them. Get them to incriminate themselves." The plan came together quickly. With Laura's technical expertise, they modified a small recording device that could be hidden in the boathouse. Charlie, with his uncanny ability to move unnoticed, would plant it before the meeting. "What if they catch me?" Charlie asked, trying to mask his nervousness. Henry placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "They won't. But if anything seems risky, you abort the mission immediately. Your safety matters more than any company." Something shifted in Charlie's expression, surprised that anyone would prioritize his well-being. As dusk fell over Cambridge, they put their plan into motion. From a distance, Henry and Laura watched as Charlie casually made his way to the boathouse, just another teenager skipping stones on the cam. The boy disappeared inside for a heart-stopping 3 minutes before emerging with a casual slouch that only Henry could now recognize as forced. "It's done," Charlie reported, rejoining them on a bench overlooking the river. "Device is hidden in the rafters above the meeting table." Now came the hardest part: waiting. At precisely 9:58 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up near the boathouse. Marcus Pennington emerged, followed by Rebecca Thornton. 5 minutes later, Edward Blackwood arrived on foot, his tall figure unmistakable even in the dim lamplight. "Recording should be picking up everything," Laura whispered, monitoring the signal on her tablet. For an excruciating hour, they waited, watching the glow from the boathouse windows reflect on the river's surface. Finally, the meeting concluded. They watched as the three figures departed separately. "Let's hear what we've got," Henry said once the coast was clear. Laura played back the recording. Their expressions grew increasingly triumphant as they listened to unambiguous evidence of the conspiracy. Marcus discussing the manufactured evidence against Henry, Rebecca detailing how they'd sabotaged key projects, and Blackwood outlining his plans for the Atherton algorithm once the takeover was complete. "We've got them," Laura breathed. "Not quite," Henry replied, his expression hardening. "Tomorrow, we spring the trap." The emergency board meeting had been called for 9 a.m. Outside Whitfield Innovations' glass headquarters, Cambridge was bathed in rare autumnal sunshine, as if nature itself approved of Henry's plan. "Ready?" Laura asked, straightening Henry's tie. They stood in a coffee shop across the street, watching board members arrive. "As I'll ever be," Henry replied, checking his pocket for the 20th time to ensure the thumb drive was secure. Charlie sat nearby, uncharacteristically smart in borrowed clothes that Laura had insisted upon. "Remember," Henry told the boy, "whatever happens in there, you've already done more than enough." Charlie nodded solemnly. "Just make sure you nail them properly." The security guards at the entrance did a double-take when Henry approached. One reached for his radio before Laura stepped forward. "I wouldn't," she said smoothly. "Mr. Whitfield is here at the invitation of 3 board members who've received some very interesting information overnight." It was a bluff, but a calculated one. Confusion bought them just enough hesitation to reach the lift unchallenged. The boardroom fell silent when Henry walked in. Marcus Pennington was mid-sentence, a presentation displayed behind him showing projections for the company under its new leadership. He froze, mouth literally open. "Please, don't stop on my account," Henry said pleasantly, taking a seat at the head of the table, his old seat. "I'm finding this fascinating." Rebecca Thornton recovered first. "Security!" she snapped. "I've called off security," said a quiet voice from the corner. Everyone turned to see Eliza Carmichael, the eldest board member, standing. After receiving Mr. Whitfield's evidence package this morning, I took the liberty of informing them that we might have a situation. Henry smiled gratefully at the woman who had been his mother's friend and his earliest investor. He'd sent the recording to only her, knowing her impeccable integrity. "Evidence package?" Marcus sputtered. "What are you talking about?" Henry connected the thumb drive to the room's presentation system. "Perhaps it's better if you listen for yourselves." The next 15 minutes were the most satisfying of Henry's life as the recording played. Every damning word, every admission, every plan. Several board members gasped audibly when Blackwood's voice outlined how they would dismantle the company once they had the algorithm. "This is doctored," Rebecca insisted when it finished, but her face had gone pale. "The original is already with the authorities," Laura informed her. "Along with the financial records your assistant preserved?" "Speaking of authorities," Eliza added, checking her watch, "they should be arriving at Edward Blackwood's office right about now." Marcus collapsed into his chair, defeated. "It was Blackwood's idea," he said weakly. "He approached me a year ago. Said Henry was undervaluing the company's potential, particularly the Atherton project. Henry studied the man he had once trusted above all others. And you believed that justified betrayal? Before Marcus could answer, the boardroom doors opened again. A young woman entered, the sister of Charlie's friend from the streets, now employed in the company cafeteria thanks to a youth opportunity program Henry had insisted upon years ago and had forgotten. "The morning's financial papers, Mr. Whitfield," she said, smiling as she handed them to him. The headline told the story: "Blackwood Empire Crumbles. Fraud Allegations Emerge." 3 hours later, with Marcus and Rebecca removed from the building and an emergency vote reinstating him as CEO, Henry found himself back in his office. The familiar space felt different now, both smaller and more precious. Laura entered without knocking, Charlie trailing behind her. "The board has approved your full reinstatement," she reported, "and they've unanimously endorsed your recommendation that I take over as operations director." "And the Pembroke Youth Program?" Henry asked. Laura smiled. "Fully funded. Charlie will be its first official beneficiary, with proper housing and education support." Henry looked at the boy who had helped save everything. "I was thinking something more permanent," he said quietly. "If Charlie agrees, I'd like to become his legal guardian." Charlie's attempt to look nonchalant failed completely, as his eyes filled with tears. As Cambridge's spires glowed in the afternoon sun outside his window, Henry understood that losing everything had actually given him something invaluable, a chance to rebuild not just his company, but his life, with purpose and connection at its heart.